Stu and the Nunn, an online show and podcast focused on national security, policy, politics, and selfless service. We are here to give you an honest opinion, a different perspective, and hopefully a few laughs. We do this by not only interviewing guests, but also sharing our own perspectives and asking you, the listener, to interact with us on our show chat room via our Facebook page and on Twitter. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nunn. It is February 25th, the last Thursday, the last show in February. We are burning through 2021 quick. And I want to welcome everyone to our show. And my good brother from another mother, good to have you back, Toby, in the Southern studio.
I am in the southern, feeling southern, no longer northern feeling. But last week, let's be honest, I was in the southern studio.
You were very south.
I was like deep south. I was like, I was, getting back to my migrant ways.
Were you weren't hanging, you weren't kicking back on the beach with a pina colada with a famous senator, were you? Just asking?
No. I was actually on the cool side. I was on the west side. I was on the Pacific side. And no, I was having a great time. I don't even feel bad about it.
No.
And, there's a lot of hate out there, for him going there. But, deal with it.
I said it last week. I said it last week, man. Hate the player, don't hate the game. If everyone in Texas could have got a flight to Mexico, they all would have been on the same thing. They all would have been heading south, right? Rather than dealing with frozen pipes and no heat and no showers. But, yeah. So, good to have you back. You missed a great show last week, dude. It was...
Yeah, no, I went back. I was listening to it on the plane. I only got to hear a little bit, and then I was having a hard time with signal breaking in and out. And then I got to really check it out on the plane. But I got to tell you, I felt like I was back in Korea a few minutes ago with that intro music. We got we playing some K-pop now.
If you noticed, I've been changing it up every week.
I know, and I love it. It's something I usually just only look forward to our guests and the conversations that we have, but now I have to look forward to the melodic offerings of whatever you got.
What am I going to bring out? And I keep it a surprise. You never know.
You never know.
I've come up with some new ways to be able to mix it all in. So so stay tuned. Hopefully people stay longer than just the first 2 or 3 minutes, but know that you always tune in and hear some wonderful no telling what's going to be next week. Anyways,
the good news is we are back. We have an amazing guest.
We do.
And, we're going back to back to back to back, when it comes to just high profile, great guests with some great relevant and conversations, as well as just fun and education. So let's bring out tonight's guest. Super excited to have him on. We got, through the network.
It's all about friends in low places.
Yeah, through the Friends Network. In a world where there's men named after animals, we can have access to many, many people. But we've gone too far. But no, so excited to have Mr. Brooks Tucker. Mr. Brooks Tucker, welcome to the Stu and the Nunn Show.
Hey, great to be here, guys. Appreciate it.
Great to have you on, and thank you for putting up with all of our charades here at the beginning. I'm just glad we have no tech issues, which seems to be a signature move of ours. But if we stay all right and everyone stays connected, then it's a win. So, Brooks, thank you so much for coming on. You have had an esteemed career giving back to this country through military and civil service, and we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. We're definitely going to hit on that stuff. But before we get into that and the meat of it, I would like you to kind of give a little bit of your bio, or just talk a little bit about your military service. I mean, you served in the U.S. Marine Corps for this country. You've done a lot of stuff before you stepped in from a uniform to a suit, and just kind of give our listeners a little bit about some of the things you've accomplished and done in your military career.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll try to keep it brief here so we can have plenty of time to talk. But I entered the Marine Corps through the Platoon Leaders Class program in 1985 through the University of Maryland. And for people who don't know what the Platoon Leaders Class program is, essentially Marine Corps Officer Candidate School stretched over 2 summers while you go to college in a civilian environment. And once you get through that filtering vetting process, I was commissioned in 1987. And then I went to Quantico, Virginia, where they train all new Marine lieutenants at it's a place called the Basic Officer Course, or the Basic School. And they have a great acronym. The Basic School acronym is TBS. It's Marine proof. After I got through the Basic Officer Course, which is 6 months, I was chosen to go to Infantry Officer Course, which I'm not sure how long it is now. I think it was about 8 weeks back then. And it was a pretty tough course, but it's gotten a lot tougher in the last years. I don't know whether I could make it through IOC today. Everyone says that about the recruit training or the training programs that are current today, but they've made IOC even more of a butt buster than it was 20, 30 years ago. From IOC, I got orders to go to 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to be a rifle platoon commander. I was a rifle platoon commander there. I was also a weapons platoon commander there, and did a deployment to Western Pacific for 6 months, Okinawa, Philippines, and South Korea. And I then moved over to 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, where I was the embarkation officer, which is essentially an assistant logistics officer for the battalion. And then we were deployed to Westpac, but our Westpac deployment was diverted in August of 1990. We got on ships in Subic Bay and transited Straits of Malacca, ended up in the Indian Ocean. Our little caravan ended up being flown ashore to an island off of Oman. We picked up C-130s there, and we flew into the eastern province of Saudi Arabia early September of 90. And we lived in the middle of nowhere for about the next 4 to 5 months until the ground war kicked off. And we were part of the breaching regiment that breached the minefields before the race up to Kuwait City. And of course, that war was over in probably less time than it took me to explain that to you in the last few minutes. But we saw a little bit of action, and was enough for us to rate combat action ribbon status with rounds incoming and outgoing. After that, I came back to Lejeune and stayed on the battalion as the battalion adjutant. And because of the personnel squeeze, I don't know if you guys know all the history of military ups and downs with purse tempo back in the 90s. That was the whole peace dividend period, where they were trying to flush as many people out of the service as they could to downsize the military. In the
we called that the Clinton time.
That's
because I was in there too. That was the Clinton time. That's right. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry, I mean to.
Yeah, so I left active duty as a first lieutenant, was selected for captain, but never pinned it on while I was on active duty, and came home to the DC area, which I'm from, and didn't have a job. And with an English degree and a Marine Corps infantry officer background, not a lot going on there.
Not a prime recruiting target, huh?
Yeah, there's a funny cartoon my wife found for me that shows, it's a Wall Street Journal cartoon where the dean is giving the student his diploma, and he says, well, here's your English degree. He says, but don't worry, there's coupons on the back.
That probably lines up with it, yeah.
So I ended up finding my way into, of all things, the financial services industry with Merrill Lynch, where they were recruiting a lot of junior military officers. I went through their training program, which was Marine-like to some degree, kind of the intensity. I stayed on there for a few years, and then I migrated to another couple firms and ended up spending about a 10-year stretch doing asset management for Deutsche Bank in the Baltimore, Maryland area. But I had stayed in the reserves the whole time, pretty much, and maintained my affiliation. It kind of lapsed as we got into late 90s. And when 9/11 happened, I was married and had a young infant son at home. I don't know how I did it, but I persuaded my wife to let me rejoin the Marine Corps. And a couple years later, after some kind of one-off training gigs in North Africa and Caucasus, I went to Iraq for a deployment over there, primarily doing operational assessments for the regimental combat teams in Anbar province. I got selected for lieutenant colonel at that time and applied for something crazy, not financial services. I applied to go and be a congressional fellow on Capitol Hill. There's roughly 10 to 12 Marines each year get selected for that. And I ended up getting selected for that. So I had always this bug to go to Capitol Hill, didn't really know how to go there and make more than minimum wage. And the Marine Corps afforded me that opportunity. So I went there for a year and I pretty much just left my corporate career behind me because I figured I had the bug and I wanted to kind of scratch that itch. I did a year on the Hill. I worked for a U.S. Senator as his adjunct military advisor, national security advisor, and really loved it and ended up staying on doing that for the next roughly 5.5 years as a civilian. And along the way, you make a lot of relationships in this world. I met a lot of good folks up there, a lot of patriots. And when then candidate Trump was running for the presidency, folks were asking me if I wanted to put my hat in the ring to be part of whatever administration might come to pass. At that point, that was summer of 2016, and no one was really giving Trump much of a chance. Well, he surprised a lot of people. I had put my resume into the kind of the bank. I got a call in December of that year to join the transition team. And I went to the transition team to work on veterans policy, not thinking that it would really turn into much. I ended up going to VA on the transition team, and there was a guy there. You might have had his beer before, Leinenkugel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jake Leinenkugel was the former CEO of Leinenkugel Breweries in Wisconsin, and he was leading the VA transition team. He also happened to be a Marine veteran.
Really? So, he was the guy?
Yeah.
I do drink his beer. Well, his shandies, to be more precise. Yeah.
Well, long story short is Jake and I struck up a friendship, and he said, hey, you got all this congressional background. We're going to submit your name to the White House for the Congressional Relations Assistant Secretary position. And I got nominated for that. I got confirmed by the Senate in 2017, August. I did that job for 3 years at the VA, which is a long slog if you're familiar with interactions with the U.S. Congress. And toward the end of, I guess, the beginning of last year, the deputy secretary for the VA left, and they moved the chief of staff into that position. And I was moved by the secretary to be the new chief of staff. So I was the chief of staff for the department for the last 9 months of the administration. And that was probably the longest, quote unquote, deployment I've ever been on. It was, I would just say, mentally and physically draining. We can get into the reasons why if you want to later. But we accomplished a heck of a lot in those 4 years, and the 2.5 years that the secretary I worked for, the longest was there. So I'm pretty proud of that. I think the kind of the metrics validate that. It's not opinion, it's fact. And I talk to veterans frequently who tell me they don't have any reason to be nice to me. They just tell me, hey, we've noticed a change. So hopefully folks out there, I know there's always a problem somewhere, but hopefully folks out there recognize that we have tried to change the organization for the better. And there's reasons for that, which we can get into when you like to.
Okay.
But that's me. That's
awesome.
Pretty much me.
No, that's a great career. We have definitely, I know where you were in Saudi, and yeah, you guys were on that eastern side, right? Doing that breach right up in there, in that Kafjar or something, I think, where the young lady
Kafji
in the
was
Kafji, yeah.
Kofje was the coastal road town right before the border, and that was 3rd Marines, 3rd Marine Regiment sector. We were part of 3rd Marines, but then we were peeled off and put in with 6th Marines, our parent regiment, when they came ashore with the 2nd Division. So we actually breached at like the elbow of Kuwait, heading in kind of from a southwest to northeast azimuth, and then we dog-legged it up to the outskirts of the city.
Okay, yeah. I breached right at the 3 corners there, right at the right in the no man's land of Saudi, Iraq, and Kuwait, right there at the corner.
Oh, okay, yeah,
just to the west of you. But you mentioned you had a job one time as an embarkation officer. Is that I thought I've heard that title before from some Marine friends. Are you pretty much like a greeter on shore, like when they land? Are you just like the welcome to the beach kind of welcome to the landing, enemies that way? I'm just curious if that would embark, because that's what it sounds like.
That's landing support battalion, which they call the red patchers, because they have a red patch on their utilities so that people can distinguish them in the landing zone from all the other people who are landing.
Right.
But Land Support Battalion does that. I was the guy who, with a team of NCOs, we would have to build the templates to load the ship with all the gear, all the vehicles, and all the equipment.
Hence why it's really a logistics position. I see what you mean by when you said that.
Yeah. But they use infantry guys to do it because they don't have enough logisticians to send to all the infantry battalions.
They use us infantry guys everywhere.
And it's because we're smarter.
That's right.
Just saying. Anyone can be logistics.
Yes. Anybody can be a cook, but only an infantry guy can fill in and be a cook for a cook.
Yeah. So kind of timely, this is y'all's anniversary, huh? This
30
week,
years.
Right? It is. Yes.
Yeah.
I think yesterday? Was it yesterday?
Yeah. Yesterday would have been 30 years.
Yep. Time erases.
You guys are so young.
Yes.
You guys are so young.
Hey, I still feel okay, but I got a lot more crackling in my bones when I get up in the morning.
Toby, I've told you before, Brooks and I both appreciated the any soldier, any Marine letters that you wrote us. We were over there for your school class.
Mine were, you'll recognize them. They had stick figures and said, with blood, don't die.
That motivated me all the way through. That's what kept me. Yeah. I didn't think that was a good. I didn't realize that was a good idea to have until I read that. And then I was like, okay, I'll do that.
The Brooks, not only is this like the anniversary of Desert Storm, but we're also seeing a lot of confirmations going on right now. What was that confirmation process like for you? Was it as we kind of see it on C-SPAN, was it hard to imagine, or was it just quick? You got up there and you're like, I'm a good dude. I'm going to do good things. I love y'all. Peace to my veterans. And they're like, looks good.
Yeah. Well, I think I didn't have a contentious confirmation hearing. I was there. Fortunately, misery loves company. So I had 2 other guys who were getting confirmed for other jobs at the same witness table as I had. So, which was good because, the more they sucked up oxygen and time was less for them to bother with me. But I think the challenge for me was that VA's Congressional Relations or Congressional Affairs Office really had borne the brunt of a lot of criticism from Capitol Hill. If you recall, back around 2014, 2015, there was this huge crisis with VA healthcare. With Phoenix, VA was more or less ground. And what had happened was, I don't really know all the details. I didn't get into a lot of post-mortem with folks on the team that I inherited, but a lot of those folks had lived through those few years, 2014 through 2016. And the problem is that whoever was more or less in charge of that office was not the most responsive, most agile person, from what I understand. And that had brought a lot of hatred and discontent onto the VA from Congress, who were demanding answers. And furthermore, there's always a lot of theater with Congress. It's just it's kind of a theatric environment up there when you have crises like that. So I came in with a mandate to try to change that mindset away from being reactive and in the fetal position every day to being more proactive. And as I told my staff, we want to go on the offense, but not be offensive about it. And I think that was really bubbling through the hearing was, how are you going to improve this organization? How's the VA going to be more responsive to Congress? So they didn't beat me up much. They kind of mussed my hair up a little bit, but they didn't really bother me too much with any acrimony. But other people do really kind of, dragged around.
Well, I mean, I think, when you look at whatever the department, whatever the cabinet position is, if it's, coming in and there's a transition and like you said, there's strife, there's turmoil, there's historical drama, of course it's going to be more contentious. I imagine this year, some departments, pretty like just check the block because like they're doing really well. Things are good. Now's the opportunity. What we're seeing now, especially what's, dominating the news cycle in terms of confirmation hearings is, we're seeing a lot of people being called out on personal political attacks, that's what people are focusing on. Like, you said this, and, you had 1,000 tweets that were bad. And, versus, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of job qualification.
Yeah.
And, but we're glad you were there. I will agree with the veterans that spoke with you. I noticed I have my challenges with the VA, just like anybody else. It's a big monster, I try to be patient with it, and things are sometimes good, things aren't always good, but I will say that some of the things that happened in the past 4 years were on the right side of the veteran. And I'm not talking the aisle, I'm not talking politics, I'm talking to the benefit of the veteran to get what the veteran needed, and with an emphasis on timely manner. And one of the things, I know that there's got to be a huge backlog. There's got to be a huge backlog due to like COVID and all the things that kind of got stymied and held up. But even with that, there was this culture that was building, and it's amazing when you look at administrations and how they can affect culture. We talked about the Clinton era. I came in at the tail end of the Clinton era, or maybe not the tail end, but I was in during the Clinton era, and there was this weird sense about your military future and how far you could go or what you could do. And then it went to like, the sky's the limit. And, if you want to be Sergeant Major of the Army, that's a real opportunity for you, son. Like, come on. And then, you saw it change, with President Obama, and you saw a mass exodus of senior leadership. You saw, both voluntary and involuntary. You saw mid-level careerists, exiting by the droves because of the uncertainty of their future. And, we see the same thing with the VA. We saw like this weird, I kind of want to say weak culture where like the employee was more important than the person being serviced. I think Phoenix is a wonderful example of that. And then the loss of faith in the program after what happened in Phoenix, that person being basically rewarded for that bad behavior. And like, that's a tough culture to change. And when I say that's a tough culture to change, not just internally, but the perspective of it, the optics of it. I mean, you got like half the veterans, most veterans aren't active with the VA. Let's be honest. In like numbers, most they're not active with the VA, be it, receiving compensation, be it engaged in services. But you had half the veteran population looking at the VA going, well, you're corrupt and you're not here for me. You're not going to service me. And like, that's a tough hurdle to come back. And y'all did a great job coming back from that. Like the choice program, the narrowing of appointments, the opportunity to get appointments faster, getting, people's claims through quicker, the building up of advocacy programs to help, some of those advocacy programs are exceptionally robust, and like getting people through, like, and that's super positive, and that kind of change. Now we're kind of in the precipice. We're kind of climbing up to what now? Like, what's our future going to be? Are we going to enjoy the same like culture of like support? Are we going to enjoy the same culture of gratitude or respect? Maybe respect's a better word than gratitude, but it's a weird place to be because we see the change. We can smell it in the air.
Yeah, I think to give you an idea of why this happened or how this happened, to talk about this cultural change, was I think the Secretary Wilkie, himself a veteran and still serving in the Air Force Reserve as a colonel, he understood a couple fundamental things about leadership, which he had learned from his dad, who was a Vietnam vet, who was wounded in Vietnam severely, and spent a lot of time on military bases as a child. He understood that what he said was, he said, I need to get out and walk the post. He said, I need to get out and show the rank and file employees who are forgotten and not appreciated, and the veterans who don't ever see a secretary, that there's a secretary here. And he might only be here for a few hours, but he's going to give you some time and he's going to give you some attention. So that was his first directive, was I want to travel a lot. I want to get out to these places where secretaries, they would tell us when we got there, we've never seen a secretary. I've been in the VA for 10, 15, 20 years. I've never seen a secretary come to this facility. I think that's telling. So that starts, when you don't have command level involvement in an organization, no matter how big or small it is, people sense that. And leaders down at those levels sense that. So just to set the predicate, the walk the post was his mantra. The other thing he did was he brought some good leaders with him from the Department of Defense, and he also motivated and activated the leaders who were there when he came in about a year into the 4 years. And those leaders, many of them in the main were veterans. I mean, the guy who runs the health administration was the deputy Surgeon General of the Army, an Afghanistan veteran, a combat surgeon. So these are real people who had real world military experience, and they understood the perspective of the veteran. I can't speak to how many of folks were of that caliber or that profile from past administrations, but I don't think there were enough of them. And we came in and we kind of flooded the zone with people who had that kind of background. The key thing to this customer service issue, which, it comes down to customer service, is we started asking veterans what they thought of how they were being treated. And we did so using your iPhone with text messaging to veterans on clockwork after they came to an appointment. So they could give feedback within hours of an appointment. This was good, this is bad, this worked out, this didn't. And all this data was converged into a way to measure where the problems were and where the successes were. And then there was a lot of sharing of good ideas. So I think that customer service, getting the veteran feedback, was critical. They were trying to start that under Obama, but it never flourished. It flourished under President Trump and Secretary Wilkie. And I think the last thing is he promoted and kept good, strong leaders and encouraged people to bring strong leaders into facilities to change this mindset about the employees and the veterans having to be on the same page. So there's a lot more to it, a lot of boring, wonky stuff that we did in the headquarters, but bottom line is leadership by example and making sure that the customer is the veteran and not the other way around.
Some of the basic tenets of that we instill in our leaders in the military of all branches, right? Leading by example, be, know, do, that kind of stuff. Like you talked about, walk the ground. Don't ask your subordinates to do something you haven't done or wouldn't be willing to do. Yeah. Probably to the three of us and many of our listeners, viewers, were like, yeah, how else would you do it, right? But is largely absent in the pure civilian sector, right? But I want to mention, you just mentioned a second ago, I had a couple things I want to talk about. You just hit on something I keyed in on. You talked about how President Trump you flooded the zone. He brought in a number of leaders. Do you think that bringing in those leaders and bringing all those people, did that make the difference, or was it more of that you had a secretary that walked that walk, that showed people, hey, do the hard right versus easy wrong. It could be easy to sit in D.C. and be wine and dine, but get out there and go to Topeka, Kansas, VA, or go to Bath, New York, or go to this place or that place. And do you think it was a mixture? Because part of it's right. We know in the military too. We look at our leaders and see how they act. Are they hypocrites, or do they have ethics and integrity, and you emulate that? That's kind of what your thoughts are.
I think it's a combination of leadership by example, walking the walk, talking the talk, and walking the post. I think it's also the leaders who were the next rung down, the undersecretaries and the assistant secretaries who were there for the most part. I also think that we tried to be as aggressive as we could with solving as many problems as we could while we were there. I think we had a lot of help from the U.S. Congress that passed a lot of transformative legislation, but the question was always, well, can they execute? And I think what we did at the headquarters level was we created an environment, a cadence of meetings, a cadence of decision process where we were able to execute on some pretty hairy, big, huge initiatives, and do it all at the same time. I look back on the initiatives that either came from legislation or from funding or from homegrown, everything from modernizing the appeals process that you guys talked about, getting appeals and claims moving faster, moving the backlog of claims down for those legacy appeals that came in before all these reforms were instituted. You had the Mission Act, which permanently funded and codified the choice program and made that more responsive to veterans than it was under the 90-day wonder kind of program that was set up under the past administration, which had a lot of flaws. The implementation of the electronic health record, which had been delayed and the can had been kicked for 10, 20 years, finally signed off on that and started to implement that. There was a lot of focus on mental health, getting same-day services for mental health for veterans who needed it. So I think, and a lot of behind-the-scenes IT work, which whenever you're doing all this stuff, it requires a heck of a lot of information technology, system infrastructure, which the VA has never had a richness of that. And they've kind of fumbled a lot of the IT that they've tried to do. So they got away from trying to home grow the IT in-house to outsourcing it off-the-shelf commercial systems that were customized. I think those many initiatives that are still ongoing were all part and parcel of how we got to a better mindset. And I think VA employees started feeling better about who they worked for and what they were doing because they weren't being beaten down as much. They were being kind of held up, and those who were bad apples were kind of moved to the side or told to find another job. But the high performers were rewarded and were kind of extolled. So I think people felt much better. I mean, the one metric I use, last thing I'll say on the employee front was in the last couple of years of the prior administration to President Trump, VA there's an internal survey that all federal agencies take. It's called the Best Places to Work Survey. It's done by the Partnership for Public Service. It's a non-governmental entity. And VA was consistently 16 out of 17 federal agencies in best places to work. In other words,
and one the largest.
and it's also the second largest, right? Yeah. So NASA is always number one. DOD and a couple others are there, and like 2 or 3 or 4. But VA was always rock bottom, right above Homeland Security.
I was going to ask who the 17th was, but yeah.
Yeah, Homeland Security is worse. Now they have a lot of other problems because they're kind of this balkanized thing that everyone kind of pushed together. But VA was 16 out of 17, and maybe it was even 17 out of 17 one year. 2 to 3 years after we came in, we had moved up to number 5 out of 17. Now that's not that's not me and my opinion. That's the opinion of the people in the rank and file who took those surveys.
Right.
And I'm sorry, number 6 last year. And I think this is not official, but I think we will move up. I'm saying we, like I still work there, but I think the VA will move up to number 5 in the 2020 rankings that are going to be coming out this month. Now, I don't care who you are, I don't care what your politics is. That doesn't happen by accident.
Right. Right. No,
that's a huge move. So we have turned over the keys to an administration to the second largest department in the government in the last month, to a pretty well-run organization with fairly high employee satisfaction, and veterans trust scores have gone up significantly too. The challenge is going to be how do they sustain that?
Right.
Is it easy to sustain that?
That goes right into a question we actually have from chat. We got from a little while ago. Doug asked, do you believe the new administration with the VA will they backslide into pre-2017 status quo? Which kind of goes right along with what you said. Do you what you've seen, who you know that's been appointed, and that kind of stuff, or will the mid-level management and the op tempo, or I'm sorry, the morale that is existing that's been built up in the last 4 years, will that help keep it going forward, or do you think the new management coming in could push it back?
I think it's too soon to say definitively where it's going to go. I think it's going to be really hard. Let's say you hit the 5 spot out of 17 in March of this year when they'll report the 2020 results. I think it's going to be really hard to keep it up there. Will it slip a little bit? Maybe not. I do think that the mid-level managers, the folks in the field, they have the tools and the ability to keep going on the same game plan, as long as they don't get sidetracked or feel like they're not being heard or being listened to or being valued by senior leadership up the chain of command. I think it's just like any organization, especially military. When you've got a good commander, when you've got a good sergeant major, and so on and so forth, a good chain of command. I think it's too soon to make a judgment on this chain of command that's being formed as we speak. I am a little bit concerned, but not too concerned about the fact that the secretary doesn't have a medical or a military background. I think there's just something intrinsic and sort of intangible about knowing soldiers, knowing Marines, knowing people who served. And you don't get that from, a congressional delegation visit. You don't get that from being in a high position somewhere. You get that from actually getting dirty and sweaty and not feeling too great about where you are out in the world with folks like that. And without a medical background, there's certainly medical proficient people in the organization who can advise on that. But I do think that could be a challenge for the new secretary, relating to veterans in a way that they feel is a genuine relationship, as opposed to something that may be a little bit forced.
It would be similar to a new battalion commander coming into, I don't know, a Ranger battalion who just came out of the JAG Corps that has no combat time. When you have a battalion full of combat hardened, grunts and snake eaters that are looking at this guy's like he's a brand new lieutenant colonel getting his command time, has never seen combat. They're going to look at him with a pretty skeptical eye and question every decision, every opinion that person makes, even if not to their face, behind the scenes. That's a lot of credibility to overcome for sure.
Yeah, I think if he's a genuine person, which I would hope he is, that he can surmount some of that. But I think some of it is just he doesn't have that profile, so he's gonna have a little bit of a headwind for a while until he can show folks what he can do.
Brooks, so I want to kind of go back a little bit, and I'm just going to ask you to speak in general terms, but we talked about challenges facing the VA. What do you think the 3 or the top challenges are facing the VA? What are the biggest hurdles that you think the VA has to face right now?
Well, I think they're doing a really good job, and we were doing a good job before January 21st, and they're continuing to do a phenomenal job with vaccinating veterans and employees. And I think the statistic I saw off a press release was they vaccinated their 1 millionth veteran in the last week or so. And that's out of probably about the 7 million who use VA frequently. You mentioned there's not all veterans use VA. There's about 18 point something million vets alive in this country today, and only about 9 million of them are actually signed up for VA healthcare, and about 7 million plus use it consistently. So out of that 7 million, I think they vaccinated 1 million, and they probably vaccinated almost all, if not close to all, their healthcare workers who need to be vaccinated for their job. So that's a huge success.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is not going to be vaccinating all these folks. Challenge is going to be reopening the healthcare system post-COVID, whenever that is, over kind of a rolling basis through the summer into the fall into next winter. And I think the biggest challenge is going to be mental health care for folks who have been isolated, kind of sequestered, haven't had a lot of contact. Maybe some of the issues of lack of human contact have exacerbated their mental health issues. And I think the system's got to be prepared to respond to that in a pretty aggressive and comprehensive way, both VA as well as community folks helping out. The other part of this, I think, is, and it's in the weeds, but one of the things that people don't know, and this is something our CIO used to say a lot, was that VA is really close to the bottom of the list in an IT deficit with funding that has not met the requirements that we need to meet to keep the system modernized and efficient. So everything you talk about, whether it was the scheduling problems at Phoenix, that was a horrible scheduling system that was broken. You talk about moving claims. You've got to have an IT system that can do that. You talk about getting benefits delivered. So all these things require upgrades to information technology. And I don't think that Congress has focused a lot on that, because it's always kind of do, and kind of get by with what you have. My sense is on the budget side, at some point they're going to have to start asking for more money on IT to keep all these systems running so we don't have another crisis. The other area I think that'll get some attention, I don't know how much they'll get done on it, is the legacy of the Desert Storm through Iraq, Afghanistan is toxic exposures. There's a lot of different cross currents on that issue, both scientifically and medically. One of the things that we work closely with DOD in the waning days administration was trying to get some more recognition for veterans who served at K2, I think in Uzbekistan. Yeah. There's only a few thousand of those folks, but apparently from all reports, the base was kind of a pool of stew of bad chemical dumping and things there. So that's something that'll probably come up in hearings in the next few months, is the toxic exposure issue, which is kind of the legacy of the Agent Orange issue. And I think the one thing they're going to have to stay on top of is customer service. I mean, they can't let up on that. They've got to continue to stay engaged with veterans and get veteran feedback. I can tell you just one last story on customer service. There's a group called Client Relations in the VA headquarters, and all they do is take all the hate mail that comes to me, like people like me and the secretary, and they try to run it to ground and find out how they can help veterans. We were aggressive about that. Anytime a veteran emailed anybody in senior leadership, there was a team of people who jumped into action to try to figure out what could be done to help that veteran. And sometimes people were being really unreasonable with us, but that wasn't our job to determine their unreasonableness. Our job was just to figure out how you fix it. Mm-hmm. And I do think that those kind of efforts need to stay very active and very robust, or else you're going to get more stories about people saying, hey, I sent an email to the new secretary. No one ever responded to it. Those kind of things. And those little problems will start to eat away at the credibility.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things when you talked about customer service, I've always, I was hesitant I waited many years after my separation before I engaged with the VA in any way, just personal reasons, like just typical infantry stupidity. But when I did have interaction, I did not feel important. I felt very diminished. I felt very like unwelcome. And in the past year, I've been invited, and this sounds like so cheesy, but I've been invited to telephonic town halls.
Yeah.
I get like a little text message, and it's, hey, this is so and so from the VA. Here's the time. We want you to be part of this telephonic, or Zoom town hall. And I'm kind of like, well, I'm important. I got invited, and I know that everyone gets invited, but like, I'm like, yeah, that's right. You do care because you asked me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether I say something or I write something or I do something is totally different. But just the being invited to the table, I'm allegedly allowed to sit at the table. I'm like, I'm a real vet. Like I'm a real vet, and like I don't have to sit at the little kids table, at Thanksgiving. They're like, hey, it's those little things like that in terms of customer service that mean a great deal, because it shows like I'm valued by the organization that's actually supposed to value me.
Yeah.
You're not a cog in the wheel. You're not just,
Yeah.
right? Because what do we get that feeling? And I've been VA for a long time, many years. And it's, draw your number, just go sit and wait. And you're sitting there with 40 years of veterans, like dudes from Korea, World War II, Vietnam, all over. And they're like 25, and it's always some angry lady. It looks like Jabba the Hutt sitting behind a booth. And she's like, what do you want? And you're just like, I mean, it's every little interaction which gives this persona and stereotype to the VA. You may have a great nurse up on a floor. You may have a great doc you talk to, but as soon as you walk out of that office, the customer service facing, the communication skills or lack thereof, and everything else that's emitted to you changes your perception till you walk out of that door. All the way to the security guy, right? And that's where I think that VA Accountability Act was probably one of the most instrumental things besides the choice, veterans' choice. I don't know what, but from my perspective outside, Brooks, it looked to me like the VA Accountability Act kind of went along with, President Trump's persona of you're fired, right? It was like, you talked about bringing in a whole bunch of people, but it was always also, not letting people be protected and flushing them out if, they kept getting score at 16, 17, or they kept getting terrible ratings. I would hope some of that behind the scenes that the media never talked about was people getting called on a carpet for some of the outcome of that.
Yeah, and I will say a couple things about that legislation. It was long in development, and once it passed, it did give the VA another means to address. In this case, it was focused on senior leaders, which was GS 15, which is the highest GS rank through the senior executives. So it was very narrowly focused on those leaders because they felt that those are the people back to Phoenix who had failed the system.
Right.
The good news, bad news about that is that unfortunately, the first group of folks who were leading that organization did not really understand how to make it function well and how to lead it well. They left. They brought in another individual to run it. That person, I think, made some pretty big strides in improving its efficiency, its operations, but it never met really the expectations that a lot of people had for it. One of the reasons is there's an alphabet soup of entities in the government and in VA who all play in this same pool of accountability. And this is getting in the weeds, but you had one acronym and another acronym, and they were kind of overlapping on who had the mission to go, whose job was it to be lead and follow or support or engage. And I think that created a lot of problems for this office in working through a backlog of several hundred complaints over the last couple of years. The other thing is that when that office made a recommendation, it was not the last word on it. They could recommend a sanction against an individual leader, and then it was up to that leader's chain of command to determine whether they would take action or not. So it really was a bit clunky. The secretary didn't let that stop him from relieving people of command. I mean, he relieved hospital directors and regional directors on numerous occasions who were just failing. So I think that word got around. To your point, the accountability word got around. People started realizing that someone was going to call them on the carpet if they didn't perform. Hopefully, that's still going to be. I think will still be part of the culture there, from what I hear from the new secretary.
Which was a departure from like Phoenix, for instance, where that person basically got rewarded.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
so
think
like
they
that.
got moved or something, or
Yeah, it was they got like a year and a half paid administrative leave, and then got reassigned to I want to say a greater position at a different location, maybe like Shreveport or something like that. The but yeah, no, I love that. Like, that's the faith and confidence of the service member should always be forefront, right? Because like that institution exists not for the betterment of the employee, um, but for the betterment of the person it serves. And it's nice to know that we're going back to the person it serves is more important than the person that has a job. The hey, one of the questions we've had a ton of guests on that have different relationships with the VA, and a guy that we've had on multiple times is a good close friend of both Troy and I, is a guy by the name of Chad Robichaux. And Chad Robichaux was the co-chair of the Faith-Based Service Alliance, and that was something that kind of came up in the last administration. And we've seen through executive order the support for faith-based, kind of parallel programs, para-VA programs. Is that a thing? Can we say that, Troy? Like,
Yep.
instead of paramilitary, para-VA. Like, we make it sound sexy. The like, do you think that the impact that these organizations made was good for the overall health of the VA community, and do you hope that that's a sustain?
I do. The secretary was very clear. There was a controversy up in New England, one of the New England facilities. I can't remember which one it was, where there was a lawsuit and a threat of a lawsuit because they had the temerity to have a Bible on display at a POW MIA display in the VA facility. And there's a gentleman out there, his name escapes me, who has made a cause of removing any kind of religious symbols from any federal building. And the secretary's comment was, well, that Bible is the same Bible that, for countless decades, American servicemen and women have prayed on and prayed with for sustenance in trying times. We're not going to remove that from a veterans facility. That's going to stay there. That was a decision he made. I think there was also a significant amount of engagement with our chaplains at the local levels and at regional levels to engage with faith-based groups. I hope that continues. I think that most Americans who may not have served at least understand the role that religion and the role that faith in God plays in the lives of people who go off to war or go to serve. So I hope that stays in place, or at least is not scaled back in any way.
One thing that the new secretary coming in, we talked about a little bit ago, kind of coming in with no military or medical background. But one of his first things, McDonough, right? He's talked about is he is doing asking for the VA to do a full gender discrimination review. Was that an issue or a problem when you were there? Was that something that you saw as we've seen our military embrace females in all branches and all jobs? We've seen just female 4-star generals and a number of things that have happened over the last few years. Did you ever hear complaints or get a feeling that there was any kind of major gender discrimination happening within the ranks of the VA for its customers, the vets, or its employees?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of chatter about this. And my sense was, first of all, not to digress, but the deputy secretary, when I was there for most of the time that Mr. Wilkie was there, was Pam Powers, who is a female veteran, Air Force colonel, retired Air Force Academy graduate. She was very instrumental in making sure that there was a focus on accepting women at VA facilities, not disparaging them, not treating them any differently, or less, giving them less opportunity for care than male counterparts. There was a task force that she worked on, established to monitor that. While we were in the administration, every facility, every VA hospital now has a military sexual trauma coordinator or advisor, primarily for women veterans, although I know there are some men who have experienced that. And there were large number of female senior leaders in VA. I mean, 60 some percent, over 60% of the VA's employees are female. Now, that doesn't mean that female veterans are going to necessarily be treated automatically well, but senior leaders in VA, the deputy secretary, some of the assistant secretaries were female, and there was a clear guidance that we needed to find a way to move beyond some of these antiquated views of women, because women are now, I think, close to in the teens in percentages in VA of veterans in the population, and there's a lot of female specific care that's being provided at VAs across the country. I will say one thing the secretary was fond of saying was Congress would criticize him about veterans, male veterans, making comments about female veterans at VAs. You hear this, in the news or anecdotally. I have no doubt that that has happened. But the secretary's point of view was, if you're a medical center director, you need to be vigilant for that and call those people out and make sure they realize they get one more shot, and they're going to have to find another place to get their care from. Maybe it'll just be send them to the local doctor versus come to the VA facility. I know that there's some facilities that have taken those steps. The other thing he would say is it's very difficult to get a guy who's in his 70s or 80s, who grew up in an all-male environment, who never really saw women as a peer or a colleague in the military, never saw women in the military, period, if he was in World War II or Korea, probably, right, except maybe in the nurse corps, and have them change their way of behavior at that age. You're lucky if you can get someone who's in their 20s to change their behavior, but not someone who's 4 times that to change their behaviors. So I think we're going to see this generational shift in the next few years as the older veterans move on, and you get more of the post 9/11 cohort in the VA facilities. I think the problem will help fix itself, but that doesn't mean we can sit back and just kind of wait for that. We've got to be proactive and make sure female veterans are cared for just as well as the male veterans and are given a voice.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was really going to be geared towards, if it was distinctly a female-male thing, or if this is geared towards one of the unknown number of alternative genders that are popping up out there, if it was geared towards that and what's happening there.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if that's part of it. I would, just to be candid, I don't know how many folks out there are in that transgender category, but I would venture to say it's probably in the very small percentage of the total population that uses VA. Those people need to be treated as equals. They're just they got the same skin and bones we all do, and they need to be treated appropriately. But I think the move that may be underfoot is more of a move towards something the VA has never done, which is the actual reassignment surgeries for folks who are qualified for that. That's something the VA does not have the internal medical sophistication or capacity to affect. So if they're going to move in that direction, they're going to have to create that capacity for the VA medical centers who would do this. And my understanding, rudimentary at best, is that this is a long, involved process. This isn't just something where you go in for one procedure. There's a lot of psychological evaluation on the front end, monitoring. There's the physical surgery, and then there's the post-operative recovery. That's something the VA has never really ventured into, and it's going to be up to Congress and the president and the VA secretary to decide how far they want to take that.
I mean, does the VA do any elective stuff? Can female veterans go in there and get a boob job, or can a guy get a butt tuck, or can you get any kind of elective stuff, or is it really to respond to medical situations? Plastic surgery
No,
for medical stuff.
I think there are some level of elective surgery there, but not just because you want it. I think
Right.
there's got to be some kind of justification for it that warrants that. There's either got to be a service connected issue to it. You've, we've really expanded the aperture of service connection in the last 20 years. It's service connection today is not what service connection was 40, 50 years ago. It's much
more. I would like to just make a quick comment on that, because I think this is one of those issues where it's gonna this is gonna affect customer service. And the reason I believe it's gonna affect customer service, because I'm just gonna speak from a personal place, and this has nothing to do with my thoughts and views on transgender people. It has not anything to do with my thoughts and views on someone wanting a breast augmentation. Like, on a personal level, I've been trying to get something done with the VA for, I don't know, say 5 years. Just trying to get a simple appointment, because I got something in my leg that I didn't put there that kind of found its way in there due to a boom. And, it's in my records. It's all documented. And, just due to oversight or, whatever, bureaucracy, getting a simple appointment to get some shrapnel evaluated in my leg that is clearly there, that is clearly service connected, with the documentation, with the medical records from the Army hospital, all that. When someone like me has a hard time getting stuff like that, and is being patient and is working with the system, and please don't mistake me for bitter, because I'm not, because I believe that with as many people as there are like me, this takes time. When you hear conversations about people getting things that are elective, that are cost prohibitive, that are time consuming,
Mm-hmm.
like the study that the DoD did, that finished in the previous administration, which led to the, not the word ban, but the ceasing of that activity. It had nothing to do with hate. It had nothing to do with it came down to, like, do we have the medical means to support people that require this much additional medical care? Do we have that medical care available? Do we have that internal training? Can we afford to deploy people to support that? Can we blah 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 blah? Mm-hmm. Knowing all that, if we inject this into a system that's already, like, let's go ahead and say, behind. Mm-hmm. And when I say behind, I mean, like, it takes time to work people through the process of claims, to add non-service connected claims, elective claims such as this, like, that now means that the reason this institution exists, the guy with his shrapnel in the leg, doesn't weigh, doesn't measure. And,
yeah.
That's how people quickly lose faith and confidence in a system. They're like, oh, is this a toy for a politician to play with, to play with whatever agenda? We're going to try this form of governance. We're going to try this form of whatever. Or is it to serve the person, male, female, whatever you choose to be, that actually did something at one time? I could care less what you want to do in your personal life. I could care less, what God you worship. I could care less, that's all personal stuff. I have my beliefs. I'm very strong in them, and I'm grateful to have them. But the VA is to support the service and what the service did to the service member, mm-hmm. Not, and it. Sorry, that was a tirade.
I have the same struggle, because I think that in our desire to be generous and caring for the veteran population in this country, we've really we continue to expand what is reasonable to do for that population, for those people who we served with. Some of them, most of them, I would say, deservedly so, that certain services need to be provided. But there's certain anomalies in the system today, and this may be an anomaly in the making, that I think if you're really good at everything you do, okay, then start doing something really complicated next. I don't know whether we have a VA system yet that is really that excellent at doing all those things you're talking about so well that we can now pivot and focus a lot of money and time and attention on a very small population of people who, not to discredit their need for the surgery, it may be very meritorious, but the question is, should the Department of Veterans Affairs be doing it? And as a follow-on to that, I would also say, at some point, it would not surprise me if the Department of Defense starts doing this too, or exploring this as well. And that is a readiness issue that people do not seem to understand. That you will be making some of these folks will be permanently non-deployable for a variety of reasons, or non-deployable for enough time that they probably will never be active in their units because of a lot of the psychological and physical issues of this specific procedure, which I know very little about, but I know enough to know that it is not something easy or simple to do.
And like you said, it's a major pivot for a very, very small number. Troy and I, we know somebody, a great infantryman, 3-time Purple Heart, recipient that, is transitioning, and, more power to him, to her, sorry. I'm like, awesome. Like, but this is a major shift, or it could be a major shift. And I believe it's not to the betterment, and not because of like lack of generosity. I don't think the system can bear it. I mean, like you said, we're not doing what we need to do well enough to like say, let's rebuild this. Like we're on the Model T, Model A. We just got the coupe, and all of a sudden someone's like, it's time to build that Bugatti. we're just not there. But I know Troy's got something.
Yeah, I want to keep you too much longer. We've been going a little bit over an hour, Brooks, but I want to ask, I mean, when we've talked about the leadership, the changes during the last hour and that's happened, the Accountability Act, I think back to the number of cases, and one was in Austin, I remember about a year and a half ago, and a number of places where I'm at in Buffalo, we've had it up here. What when your job is to service and care for veterans who've served this country, and you have a veteran that walks out into the front lawn and puts a gun to their head or some way takes their life, I've got to imagine. I know for me, if I was a leader, if I had worked in the VA, much less if I was a leader or anything in that VA, but just work there, to me that would be absolutely crushing to know that someone, whether it doesn't matter if they even, did I walk past that person? Did I not stop and check on them? But I see him sitting in the corner in the cafeteria in the basement, not walk up and check on whatever. Doesn't have to be in my care. That it has to be absolutely crushing. And I'm just wondering how were administrators, leaders, and folks like that. One, I know it had to bother a number because the number of people working those VAs are our vets themselves. I would hope it bothers them. But how did they deal with that? How were leaders, were they measured on that when you got veterans walking out in the front lawn saying, I'm doing, and making a statement, sometimes through written form, or maybe they yell it out, that they feel like they're completely neglected and forgotten, and they, we have the 22 a day, and they're one of them on the grass of the VA itself. How is that taken?
I can tell you, I would every night, every day, I would look at my phone, and if I saw an incident report coming in, I would wonder, am I going to open this email up and see that someone had taken their life on VA property, essentially, or in a VA facility. I think the one thing that we tried to do was always go back and take a deep dive into what happened to that veteran. In some cases, these are veterans who were getting care at a facility and had no suicidal ideation at all, and were being asked all the questions and monitored, and you just don't know sometimes what's going through someone's head. So it's hard to predict those things and get ahead of them. I think one of the things that the VA did do and is doing is what's called the Reach Vet program, which is assessing someone's medical records for at-risk kind of factors, to try to forecast the risk of them harming themselves or having a crisis, to get ahead of, or kind of get, you say, in the military, get left of the boom versus have to deal with it at that moment. And I think that effort, some other things have been undertaken in emergency rooms when veterans show up in emergency rooms at VA, is asking them numbers of questions that can hopefully identify whether they are someone who is in a fragile state. I know that there's a lot more awareness about suicide today with the veterans community. The president set up this task force, the Prevents Task Force, which is a whole of government approach, which really uses all the agencies of government that have a stake in this to try to find out how they can contribute to suicide prevention awareness. And that's still ongoing. I don't think it's been disbanded just because of the change in administrations. But this is a vexing problem because so many of these folks, I think, as I said earlier, with COVID, are now even more isolated in some cases. And I don't know, this is just my opinion, brutally honest with you. I don't know if we're not going to get to functional zero on suicides. There's so many factors with mental health today and suicide in this country that have nothing to do with veterans. It's just people's lives have been turned upside down economically, socially, relationships have fallen apart for a variety of reasons. And our coping mechanisms are really challenged by just the environment of modern life. So I think that we can help move the number down. I think we need community involvement in that. I don't think VA government can't do it by itself. But there's a lot of effort on that. It's going to be a long slog, and we're going to lose more people. I mean, I will just tell you personally, I won't get into the details, but a guy I knew who was, he was at my retirement ceremony. He was actually the senior officer at my retirement ceremony from the reserves back in 2013. He's a special operation guy, and he took his life yesterday. And
man, I'm sorry to hear that.
This is a lot of history here with this fine person, but he had a lot of coping issues. He had a lot of issues that he was trying to deal with, and I think he just felt like he didn't have any options. I think that's the thing we've got to do is get to folks earlier and more aggressively, and try to understand the signs, because you try to change the direction of someone who has certain behavioral layers upon layer for a certain number of years. You're not going to be successful most times. You're not going to be successful if they're not willing to be invested, and you can't figure out how to reach them. It's going to be tough. And there's a lot of folks out there, a lot of pride, who they need to let that pride down a bit and just accept help.
Yeah, I would not have asked that if I would have known. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh no,
so close.
Look, we all did the team. We did the team approach. I mean, everyone did all they could, and I was clear-eyed about it. I said to my wife just 2 days ago, it was kind of odd. I said, I just don't think this is going to work out. I think that we're all trying to get someplace with this, but you've got to have you've got to get to someone earlier than we tried to intervene with this friend of ours, and there's too much history there. Yeah. There's a lot of people, a lot of history that they don't talk about any of this stuff. We got to get away from this. Hey, I don't talk about stuff. We got to be broke.
At least you tried. At least you tried.
Yeah. Toby, what do you got?
Well, that's really, we've been kind of going for an hour and some change. We really appreciate your time, Brooks. What I'd like to do, and Rob, I think, is kind of on and off here tonight, our unpaid producer, and he was in Facebook jail because he made a joke. But Brooks, I would really like to have you back. We would love to have you back in, like, say 6 months, because a lot of the things like we talked about You know, one, you know, this gave us the opportunity to say thanks for a job well done while you were there, and guys like me and Troy and guys like Rob Ulry, and, you know, people appreciate John Kaiser. A lot of people in our chat room, you know, made comments, you know, how they like truly appreciate the efforts you guys did while you were there with what you had to work with and what you left with. And we would love to have you come back, and we got a VA employee begging you to come back right now. I'm assuming that's to
Go
work,
back to
not
the
to the
office,
show.
or go back to the office. They
But
changed the locks. Can't get in.
but no, like we would love to have you back on the show in like 6 months, so we can kind of like do a report card and just see how we're doing. And you know, because you have such a great perspective, and you know, we have this anecdotal, you know, kind of mentality, and we have our own lens that we look at things
Yeah.
through. And you have this like big picture, you know, like we didn't even get to talk about the record stuff, and what a big, you know, important, like monumental, like epic thing, like the transitioning and the migrating of all these records to electronic, you know, making it, you know, so everyone had everything, you know, aggregated, you know, like we didn't even get to talk about those huge accomplishments. And so we'd love to have you back in like 6 months to see how all that's going, and just kind of
Yeah.
hear your thoughts, and kind of we'll get Brooks' state of the VA address on the Stu and the Nunn show, if that's all right.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see where they go, because I think it's way too early to pass any kind of judgment. I think
For sure.
you see some kind of maybe some leading indicators, but that could be all fog and smoke, and you know, 6 months from now maybe a
For
lot
sure.
Yeah, kind of hard to pass judgment right now. They still have vacancies they haven't filled. They've got to get people in position, and
yeah,
that kind of
it's
stuff.
very early.
Yeah. But yeah, if you do that, that'd be great. We appreciate it. Hey, we've talked about a lot tonight. Like Toby said, we've went a little long. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned? Any program, any just great story, or something you just want our listeners and viewers to know about that we did not hit on that you think would be good for them to know?
Uh, yeah, I would just, you know, I've been involved for many years. It's a long story, but I'll try to be as brief as possible because of time constraints. But my my battalion CO in the Gulf War is a guy named T.S. Jones, and he retired as a two-star in the Marine Corps, Major General. And his life passion was to help young kids who lived in the area around where his wife grew up in Southwest PA, which is a very economically depressed area. He created a program called Outdoor Odyssey, which is in a place on a mountain near Johnstown, PA. That was expanded in '06 to help veterans through a week-long retreat. And Tom Jones is, you know, hard as nails kind of guy. If you Google Semper Fi Odyssey, you'll see this program. It's not very well known. It's affiliated with the Marine Corps' nonprofit Semper Fi Fund, which helps fund some of it. But the bottom line is that Jones and his crew are trying to get this program known to veterans who use vet centers. And for veterans out there who frequent a vet center, if you don't know about it, Google it and find out about it, and maybe ask the folks at your vet center about it, because they're trying to expand awareness of this. It's all freight is paid for a veteran who's qualified through a vet center. Vet center screens them to go to this, and they go there for a week, and essentially it develops some of the skills around resiliency, around self-awareness, around building a personal plan and a professional plan, which a lot of people say they have but don't really have. And the key thing that I think come back to suicide and mental health is it helps you determine how to build your, essentially what Jones calls your fire team. Everybody needs a fire team. When we've gone up there and talked to veterans, we say, who's on your fire team? And they might name one or two people. And we tell them, well, it can't be your wife and it can't be your brother. It's got to be somebody who's a friend of yours who will help you no matter what. And it helps veterans understand they can't do this alone. They can't get through their challenges alone. They need a fire team to support them. They need a plan and a 5-paragraph order for life, if you will. So those are the things that Semper Fi Odyssey teaches. And it's not just for Marines. I mean, it started out for Marines and Navy corpsmen, but it's expanded now to any veteran who is qualified to come up there. And I think it's a phenomenal program. It's one of many out there in the country, but I would check it out if you guys are interested in it. Maybe I can get someone from that program if you want to talk to you about it. But it's a wonderful program. It's one of these things that's very well designed, and I wouldn't normally talk about it, but gave me the opportunity, so I did.
No, absolutely. Go ahead, Toby.
We're both big outdoor guys. I work with a great organization, Veteran Outdoors, and I believe that getting outdoors is crucial. As veterans, we spend a lot of time in our adult lives, being trained and feeling most comfortable in austere environments, and the outdoors is a great way to break down those barriers and be authentic with each other, and really kind of, anytime you face adversity together, you build that bond, you build that friendship. That's why all those exercises, that's why you lock arms and lane the surf in Coronado. That's why you do all these different things, right? So big fans of that, and we would love to talk to anybody about that. And again, thanks for taking time to go up there and talk to those folks, and shout out to Major General T.S. Jones for doing it. And anytime I hear Semper Fi Fund, I just get a huge warm spot in my heart. One of my favorite human beings on this planet is Karen Gunter, and no great. And so I'm an Army guy, and that warms my heart. So again, Brooks, I really appreciate you taking the time and chatting with us, and I appreciate you putting on the professional filter tonight, while Troy and I came with baldness and mullets. So
yeah, that's okay. I just came from a meeting, so I didn't have a chance to get all grungy on you.
That's okay. That's all right. You brought a lot of class to the show, but we'd love to have someone on from there. I mean, that's what we do, right? We want to talk. We want to expose people to this. We want them to hear these things. And if it's here in this program, let someone know about it. I mean, it's 4 hours from where I live. If it lets them know about it and can get someone there, I mean, we all care about all service members, right? Soldiers, airmen, Marine, sailors, and we don't want to see that number anywhere near 22. And if it means getting someone some resiliency, dropping the bravado, realizing it is asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's actually more of a sign of strength, showing humility. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for letting us know about that. And we're looking forward to having you back on in 6 months. And get a good assessment. Brooks, thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining us. Everyone else, thank you for tuning in, letting us in your houses tonight on your screens. It is February 25th, and we are wrapping up February 2021. We've about knocked out the first 2 months. Be sure and join us next Thursday here on stewandthenunn.com, 8 o'clock Eastern. You always know where to find us. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell the people you don't like. Go back, watch any of our shows anytime you want. So with that, I'm going to bid you fine gentlemen a good night, and everyone else, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you, guys.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Stu and the Nunn Show, and we hope you had as much fun listening to it as we did hosting it for you. Don't forget to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. You can find all these links at stewandthenunn.com. We will talk to you again next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. Also, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Commodity Outdoors, Veteran Outdoors, Enlisted 9 Fight Company, Warrior Media Solutions, and BooHammer.com. Thank you again, and have a good night.